So, Nate, how might community members help each other rest? We've been talking about this, that rest is really rooted in community and not in the individualized perspective we tend to impose upon it. But is
Hmm.
there a way that community members can support one another when one is more tired and when another has more support to give? What might that look like?
Yeah. So a couple of things come to mind. Um, I've mentioned, one of the ways of trying to define what Sabbath might look like is that uh, through the Sabbath we put down the things that tempt us to believe our lives depend on them, so that we can remember that our lives ultimately depend on God and God's grace and goodness and love. Um, and even that definition, or that guidance can get reduced to like this individual, like, so what is the thing that I am tempted to believe? Well, which isn't a bad question. I think that can be actually very illuminating. But what if we also ask that question as a community? So within a congregation or a youth ministry or whatever, like, what is the thing that for us tempts us to trust it too much? Um, and is it schoolwork, or is it the resume, or whatever? And I think it could actually be really powerful for a youth group, for example, to work to come up with an exercise that lets them articulate, like, what are the things that tempt them to believe their lives depend on them, and then what would it look like to corporately put that thing down? And so maybe that means, it's very easy for me to imagine, I go back to the technology thing, like, what if, and I know there are youth groups that do this, where the kids show up, and all the phones go into a basket, and then they're there for the duration. If you can imagine a distant world where people can gather in the same room. Um, but something like that, what does it look like as a community to discern together the thing or the things that God is inviting them to put down, so that their hands are open to receive God's gift of rest, and then it becomes sort of corporate through and through. And I think there's ways to do this even amidst COVID, um, where you could even set aside a specific time of a specific day, and everyone in a given community could say, "Hey, we're going to do this thing, even if we're not doing it together." Um, and I also think there should be Sabbath by addition, not just Sabbath by subtraction. So you put down the thing, but then what's the thing that God might be inviting us to pick up, to remind us of God's goodness, to redirect our gaze to what God is up to in our world or in our lives. Um, I mean, food is my go-to for that, like a shared meal as a way of remembering God's goodness and bounty. And you got to pay attention to, like, so who's the one that has to prepare the meal, and like all that kind of stuff. But our Jewish siblings are really good at this, at figuring out like the preparation that can happen in advance, so that that Sabbath moment can remain sacred and really set apart. I think there's all kinds of great opportunities there.